appreciate all of you being here and particularly your work on this issue. We have a legislative, as you know, initiative before us right now. We voted on it yesterday. I assume we'll get to it again in the next couple of days. Just as a group, do you support the legislative initiative that has now passed the Senate and the House and is now back in the Senate? Do you think this will help?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. My concern, as I've talked to Admiral Shukat about, is the eradication efforts. And there is incredible science that needs to go on here in order for us to better understand this problem. And I understand the need for that, and that's one reason legislation is so important, because it funds some of the research and science that's necessary. It's amazing what we don't know. But what we do know is that eradicating these mosquitoes is important, and each one of you in your own way talked about that. Mr. Johnson, you talked about some of the efforts that have already been made in this regard in Latin America, for instance. And again, Admiral Shukat and I talked about this, but one of my concerns is that we're not prepared as a country to do the mosquito abatement that's needed, and specifically that we don't have the federal capability. I happen to come from Ohio. We happen to have at the Youngstown Air Reserve Station the one fixed wing operation in the entire military. You know the 910th probably. They do an awesome job. They did this in Texas and Louisiana following Katrina, which was very helpful in terms of reducing the risk of infection. They also do other spraying missions for vegetation and so on. But I guess my question to you all is, are you concerned about that also? One of your colleagues spoke to us about this at a hearing, I don't know, Mr. Chairman, I think we had it about 4 weeks ago, and he said one of the things we think is really important, the Zika outbreak is pointing out the need to really revitalize mosquito control efforts. This was Rear Admiral Stephen Redd. He said the variability of mosquito control districts in the U.S. is remarkable. Some localities have finally owned enterprises. You talked about that today a little bit. Some have, hardly any at all. I think there could be a role for a federal air wing in locations that do not have that capability and need it. Could you comment on that, his comments, and tell me what you think we ought to be doing in terms of having a federal response for some of these areas that don't have effective mosquito control?
Yeah, that's right. The mosquito control is critical, and I don't think anyone could have made up a virus like Zika, that a mosquito bite that can cause such devastating health complications, and that in fact can also be sexually transmitted. But we know that mosquito-borne diseases continue to emerge and cause problems, and so the country's capacity to tackle these vector-borne diseases is very important. I agree completely with Admiral Redd that we need at the federal level to have the technical assistance and the ability to supplement what the state and localities can do. Much of this is learning what works best, because what works best for Zika is different than what works best for West Nile. And the opportunity to do aerial spraying, for instance, is important in many control efforts.
Gail.
Yes. I would certainly agree that there needs to be aerial spray capability in greater extent across the United States. We probably in Lee County have some of the best there is. And we actually have a fly-in every year where people come to our district to train in aerial spray, and the Air Force participates in that with us.
You know the 910th?
Yes, yes. And so our plan with regard to attacking Zika or Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus mosquitoes involves aerial. If we get to a situation where we have local transmission going on, it will involve using aerial assets for both adulticiding and larviciding of these mosquitoes. We have technology that will allow us to do ultra-low volume spray technique, very similar to the adult mosquito control technique, but we can actually put larviciding material into these cryptic habitats that the Aegypti and albopictus mosquitoes live in, and we can be very successful in controlling these mosquitoes over a wide area with these kinds of assets. It's very expensive, and it's a technical issue, but that's how we plan on attacking it, locally.
This is one area where we can all agree, I think, that there's a need for this kind of mosquito abatement, and that the federal government has a role here, particularly in some of the communities that don't have the assets that you have in your local community. And I'm glad you're working with the 910th. I'm concerned that, by the way, they're about to be deployed to the Middle East, or they're going to have one plane available, only one fixed-wing plane, period, for the whole United States. And we're working with the Air Force on that, back and forth with the Secretary of the Air Force. But I would appreciate you all, giving us your advice on this so that we can ensure that we end up with a fixed-wing operation that is effective to be able to respond should we have this situation of the infections. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Portman. Senator Baldwin,